Hospitals, a place where the sick are cured, the wounded healed, and the dying saved. It is also a place where new life comes into this world. One can call this a haven of healing and happiness. However, not all may think the same. For them, a hospital is a place of pain, sorrow, and death. A place where the lie, "it's nothing serious," is blatantly used. They even consider it worse than a prison, trapped in an empty room with machines attached to you and silence haunting you at each passing minute. As for me, I believe in the latter. After only 3 hours on my first day as an admissions clerk, I can say with surety that it is definitely not a haven. Sick and injured patients come with terrified expressions, unknowing of what they might get diagnosed with. It had only been a month since the hospital opened, and just yesterday, they put up an urgent hiring advertisement for a clerk in the night shift. The quoted salary package was handsome, so, naturally, I applied. An hour later, I received a call from someone at the hospital. He wished to take the interview via call, to which I had no objections. After giving what I felt were the right answers, the person on the phone sounded pleased and offered me the position. I was told to join the very next day, which was pretty quick on their part. I assumed they must be short-staffed, as they concluded the hiring process in a matter of a few hours. That's how I ended up working here at this hospital. Looking at the structure of the hospital, one can tell it is a modern design. A small, minimalistic, square-shaped building with glass windows lining each floor. Though the hospital was not that huge, its simple yet clean design made it stand out from the rest of the worn-down buildings surrounding it. The ground floor was complete and operational, however, the upper floors all the way to third level were not. Construction had abruptly stopped, for some reason, which I assumed was due to lack of funds. Entering the hospital, you are greeted by the admissions desk on the center left and an elevator across it on the far right. On either side of the admissions desk were the patient wards. The ward doors had a high-tech lock system which only opened when it scanned a special key card, given to all staff members. In the front and right side of the hospital were various rooms allocated to doctors. During busy hours, patients and doctors alike would be seen entering and exiting these rooms. The striking thing about the hospital's interior was that there were no stairs that connected to the upper floors. The elevator was the only means used to access them, and it was closed off due to the construction. This wasn't an issue, as I was told there wasn't anything in the upper floors. There's more? Apparently, the clerk whose position you filled in, Mr. Cameron, has also been missing since that day. The last footage of him was entering the patient's ward. After that, him and Ms. Lubna simply vanished without a trace. I tried to take this all in. It sounded comical, almost like Mr. Rayam was teasing me on my first day, but his expression remained serious throughout. Even now, there was no hint of a smile on his face. Don't wrap your head around this too much. I only told you this so that you weren't in the dark about it. For now, just focus on your work. Easier said than done. How was I supposed to entirely ignore that story and focus on work? I just gave a nod and started to arrange some papers. It was now almost 12 a.m. Two doctors, Dr. Hassan and Dr. Faison, were idly chatting in front of me while 3 nurses sat on the couches. Basically, all the night shift staff was killing time in the main area. I wasn't, myself, doing anything but aimlessly scrolled through my social media when a single ding interrupted us. The elevator panel went up and showed that the elevator was coming down from the 3rd floor. Mr. Rayam, I thought the upper floors were empty and there was no one up there, I asked, a bit puzzled. "I was told the same," said Mr. Rayham as he got up and made his way around in front, blocking my view. Another ding signaled that the elevator had reached the ground floor and the doors slowly started to open. I tried to get a glimpse of who it was, but the people in front of me blocked my view. Then I heard one of the nurses scream, followed by 2 words from Mr. Rayham that sent a chill down my spine. "Dear Lord." I got up from my chair and almost puked at what I saw. In the center of the elevator was a heavily mutilated corpse of what was once a person. The arms and legs had been ripped off and interchanged with one another, meaning the legs were sticking out from the arm sockets and the arms from the leg sockets. The head had been cut off clean and was planted in the chest. The inside of the elevator was covered in blood, and on the back wall was written, "Not the one in blood." Everyone stood frozen in shock at what they saw. Dr. Hassan was the first one to come out of shock and moved towards the body. He called for someone to help him move the body, but no one moved an inch. He then motioned towards me, which brought me back to my senses. I shakily went to him and lifted the body out of the elevator. The moment we stepped out of the elevator, the doors closed behind us and the elevator powered off. "What the hell just happened? And whose body is that?" shouted Dr. Faison. Mr. Rayham and Dr. Hassan slowly examined the body. Suddenly, Mr. Rayham stopped and exclaimed, "Lord, I think this is Cameron. The face is heavily disfigured, but these were the clothes he was wearing the day he went missing." I tried to absorb all of this. The previous clerk shows up dead and his body is heavily disfigured, and what could possibly be assumed as the work of a psycho killer. Which meant we now have a problem on our hands. "Let's call the police now. There could potentially be a psycho killer hiding in the upper floors," I said. "Like hell we are. The owners strictly told us to solve the issue without involving any outside party. I don't want to lose my job here because of some wannabe smart-ass kid," replied Dr. Faison. "Are you crazy? There is a dead body here. This is no longer a matter that we solve ourselves." Dr. Faison was spewing nonsense. How can we stop a suspected killer ourselves? "All right, that's enough. Let's first put the body somewhere for now and clean up the blood here. We have patients in the ward, and I don't think it would be good if any one of them saw this sight. We should keep this to ourselves for the moment and see what we can do," said Dr. Hassan. "True. It would be better for us to close off the hospital for the night as well to prevent any more people entering the building," added Mr. Rayham. His eyes showed terror. Dr. Hassan nodded at that and turned away from everyone else. At that moment, I clearly saw the fear in his eyes. He was trying his best to stay calm, but everything that just happened was too much. Dr. Hassan faced us all again and then directed each of us some tasks. After some complaining, Dr. Faison and 2 other nurses carried the dead body to the emergency room. The other nurse and Dr. Hassan went to explain the ruckus to the rest of the patients in the ward as being merely a drunkard entering the hospital. Me and Mr. Rayham went to close down the entrance. We pulled down the shutters in front of the hospital doors and turned off the lights outside. "I don't know what's even going on here. First 2 people went missing here and then one of them turns up dead," muttered Mr. Rayham. I wasn't doing any better myself. My hands were shaking violently as I secured the shutter in place. At about 1 a.m., we all gathered back in the lobby. I was the first to break the silence. "What do we do now? If all goes well, we may be able to make it through the night, but then what?" "It would be wise to call the police, but as Dr. Faison pointed out, we shouldn't involve any outside party. We would be the prime suspects if the killer simply escapes from the roof. The other issue we would face is that we weren't able to guarantee safety for our patients as Miss Lubna is still missing, responded Dr. Hassan. I started to question again, but then the lights went out. Even the backup generator didn't start. The only light, now, was coming from the street lights outside. Before we could react, the elevator panel once again lit up with a ding and the elevator slowly went up to the 3rd floor. All of you hide somewhere. Either the killer is sending down Miss Lubna or the person is coming down themselves, commanded Dr. Hassan. The doctors and nurses hurriedly hid in the doctor's rooms. Me and Mr. Rahim hid under the admissions desk. I would rather not imagine what the killer might have done to Miss Lubna's body. I tried to calm down my breathing so that I don't give myself away. After about 10 seconds, a ding sound pierced the silence and I heard the elevator doors open. I held my breath, hoping it wasn't anything worse. But obviously, I was wrong. Following the sound of the doors opening, I heard a footstep, and then another. Whoever it was had just exited the elevator. The elevator doors then closed. The person slowly made their way towards the admissions desk. I clasped my hand over my mouth so that I didn't make any noise. I had no way of telling who it was. Was it the killer? Did that person have any weapons with them? The footsteps stopped. The only thing separating us and that person was just a thin layer of wood. I then heard something smack the desk right above me. "Dear, is anyone here?" It was a female's voice. I turned to Mr. Rahim, and he mouthed the words Miss Lubna. I tried to get up, but Mr. Rahim held me down and signaled me to wait. Before I could object any further, Mr. Rahim's eyes suddenly widened. He was looking at something behind me. I slowly turned around in frozen horror. It was dark, but the light from the streetlights outside was just enough to see. Miss Lubna's neck had extended 10 meters and her head was searching behind me. From the sound of light tapping, her fingers on the table on the desk above, I could tell that her body was still standing right where it was before. I was scared, too scared. My body refused to move. I could not believe what I was seeing. "Where are you?" asked Miss Lubna. It almost sounded like she was mocking us. Her head turned around and our eyes met. They were completely white, and she had a grin on her face. A second passed, then another. Her head slowly scanned both me and Mr. Rahim and then retracted back. I heard footsteps move away from the desk. "Where are you, dear? Is no one going to welcome me?" I slowly let out my breath. I had no idea I was holding it in. Furthermore, I looked at my hands and saw they were shaking violently. I looked towards Mr. Rahim and saw that he was sweating. "What is that thing?" I whispered. My voice was trembling. Mr. Rahim just shook his head. It looked like he had lost his voice. A door opened to the right and I heard hurried footsteps towards Miss Lubna. "It's Miss Lubna. She looks all right. We should attend to her and see if she suffered any injuries." It was Dr. Faison. "Doctor, wait, something's not right," shouted Dr. Hassan, but it was already too late. "Dear, is that you?" I silently glanced over the desk and saw the horror unleash. Dr. Faison stopped just a few steps from Miss Lubna. "Dear, you don't look right. Let me fix you up," said Miss Lubna as she jumped on top of Dr. Faison. "What are you doing, woman?" "Get off of me," shouted Dr. Faison. Then I heard a bone crack followed by a scream. Miss Lubna ripped out Dr. Faison's right arm. Dr. Faison howled in pain as blood splattered the floor. Yes. Yes. Let the hot nectar spill forth and bathe me in red. Let me drink the wine of thy sacrifice, shouted Miss Lubna. I was frozen in fear yet again. My legs refused to move. Mr. Rayam was the same. His eyes were transfixed on the horror. We didn't move an inch. I couldn't see properly due to the darkness, but it looked like Miss Lubna shoved her hand straight into Dr. Faison's chest, after which he stopped moving. "Oh dear, you stopped moving." "You were not the one, man," said Miss Lubna as she got up. "I did hear the presence of one other nearby. I'll make sure my playthings don't leave just yet." With that, she raised her hands towards the sky and started chanting in an unknown language. Just as she finished, I grabbed my left hand as I felt a burning sensation in my left wrist. Mr. Rayam was also clutching his left hand. The pain subdued in a few seconds and a red mark that resembled the mathematical division sign showed up where the pain began. Miss Lubna dragged Mr. Faison's body with one hand and held his arm in the other and headed towards the elevator. "You may not be the one, but you'll do for now." The elevator doors opened, and she got in, dragging Mr. Faison's body. I got one last look at her blood-smeared grin before the elevator doors closed. The elevator traveled to the 3rd floor, after which the panel turned off. With that, the lights in the hospital came back on. "What in the world just happened?" questioned Mr. Rayam. Dr. Hassan also came out from the doctor's room. It seemed like he closed the door once Miss Lubna attacked Dr. Faison. I don't like using this term because it makes me sound unprofessional, but that thing was no human. It was definitely a demon, stated Dr. Hassan. One of the nurses came out of hiding and darted towards the hospital entrance. "I don't want to die. I don't want to die," she muttered. As soon as she grabbed the door, she screamed and then doubled over. I must have found my strength because I ran towards her, with Dr. Hassan right behind me. I looked to see what happened and saw that the nurse's left arm was completely covered in burn marks. "What is just going on?" said Dr. Hassan in a low voice. We carried the nurse back and laid her on one of the couches. Within seconds, some patients came out of the wards demanding to know about the screaming. Some were clutching their left wrists as well, which I assumed they too got the mark. Upon seeing the blood in the lobby, they stopped. "Is that blood?" asked one of them. "We have a situation on our hands," stated Dr. Hassan as he tried to hide the fear evident on his face. I looked towards the elevator, the panel blank, as if it never once turned on. St. Daniel's Mental Hospital was haunted. Everybody in town knew that. Especially Century Manor, the old house at the back of the property which had stood there for 150 years, longer than any other building on the grounds. Maybe that's why it was such a popular place for kids to go urban exploring. We all wanted to prove that we could brave going in there. Not just to ourselves, but to each other. That's why Teddy and I went in there, I guess. It was partly just boredom, the product of a late August day with the end of summer vacation looming ahead in the next 2 weeks. There was a feeling between the two of us left unspoken that we had wasted the summer. Everyone else in class would be talking about trips to Europe or cruises in the Caribbean, while Teddy and I would be left without a story to tell between the two of us. My parents were supposed to take me to the beach one week in July, but it had been thundershowering, so we had stayed home. Our camping trip had likewise been canceled due to a family illness. Teddy's family had even fewer planned summer events, but they had been likewise plagued by misfortune and last-minute cancellations. His parents' motto seemed to be the same as mine: "We'll make it up to you next summer." And that left us feeling antsy and annoyed as we meandered around the perimeter of the mental hospital grounds, the place we were not supposed to venture into. Our families lived in a neighborhood across the street from a century-and-a-half-old asylum, so we knew about the lore of the facility better than anyone, but our parents were much more concerned by the tangible threats posed by patients who wandered the hospital grounds largely unsupervised. "I know what we should do today," Teddy said suddenly. "Let's go explore Century Manor. I heard there's a way to get inside." Part of me wanted to say no, to make up some excuse, but another part of me was desperate for adventure and a tale to tell in September. Everyone else in class would have a vacation story, but we would have a ghost story. "All right, let's do it," I agreed, following him as he stepped foot onto the forbidden grounds of the asylum. I hurried after him and we stayed close to the tree line, hoping to avoid detection. When we got to Century Manor, I looked up to see the old building's windows staring down at us like sleepy eyes. Its dark, ancient exterior was falling apart in places, the trim moldy and rotting. Tiles from the roof had slipped off and lay on the grass, turning it brown beneath their weight. "So, how are we supposed to get in?" I asked, looking at the steel bars on all the windows. "How about the front door?" Teddy said, smiling, walking towards the entrance. I couldn't believe it. The old wooden door should have been tightly locked, but instead it was hanging open, swaying gently in the breeze. "Weird. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be locked," I said, following Teddy towards the entrance. It was dark inside, almost impossible to see past the first few feet. My friend took a few tentative steps into the house before being swallowed up by shadows. "Hey, wait up!" I called after him, but there was no indication he'd heard me. Looking down, I saw a loose brick lying on the porch of the old house. I picked it up and used it as a doorstop, hoping it would prevent anyone from closing the door and sealing us inside. Suddenly, I was beginning to realize that was a real possibility. "Teddy, I'm not sure about this," I said, stepping into the dark house. It took my eyes a few seconds to adjust. I blinked and looked around to see the old house was dingy and falling apart inside, even worse than the exterior. The ceiling to my right was bulging and looked ready to cave in at any second. The floors creaked noisily with each step I took, as if ready to break. "Let's go look upstairs," Teddy said, seeming bored already with the main level. Despite his eager attitude, I felt like there was something immediately wrong with this place. It was like a weight on my soul, crushing my heart and making it difficult to breathe. "Don't you feel that?" I asked. "Feel what?" But before I could answer, Teddy was already climbing the stairs going up to the second level. The stairs squeaked and strained with each step. I saw Mouse scurrying up ahead on the main level and hurried to catch up with him, taking a nervous glance back over my shoulder at the front door, which was still hanging open, like the door to a trap, about to snap shut. The two of us climbed the stairs and explored the second floor, but of course Teddy wanted to keep going. There was a third floor in the old manor, and he wanted to see that too. So far, there was nothing to explain the uneasy feeling I was getting, but the sensation was growing stronger the closer we got to that third level. "I don't like this," I told Teddy, as we came to an old, gray wooden door covered in graffiti, including a few pentagrams. "Let's go back, okay? This doesn't feel right." He looked at me like I was being a scared little kid, ruining his adventure. Which I guessed I was. I felt a little bad about it, but I couldn't ignore the feeling I was getting. It was becoming overwhelming. "Okay, you big baby. This is the last room, then we'll leave," he said, pushing the door open as I told him to stop. I had a strong suspicion that whatever was giving me these negative feelings was just beyond that door. And when it opened, I saw I was not wrong. The scene playing out on the third floor was like something out of a horror movie. Except this was real life. A girl who was dressed in century-old clothing stood before a small fire which was burning at the center of the room. She was giggling as the pile of kindling she had lit grew brighter and the fire burned hotter. I heard her chanting some dark incantation under her breath, and her eyes rolled back. Suddenly her voice was no longer that of a child, but of something else much deeper, much more evil. "What the hell?" Teddy yelled, snapping me out of my terror momentarily. At least he could see it too. If not for that, I wasn't sure what I would do. "Would you let go of my arm, man? What is your problem?" That was when I realized he couldn't see any of it after all. The little girl and the fire, it was all invisible to him. I'd heard this place was haunted, but maybe not everyone was capable of seeing the phantoms who resided here. Just as I had that thought, Teddy pulled his arm out of my vice-like grip and began to march into the room. "You're so weird, dude. There's nothing here." I was frozen in place, unable to scream, as he walked straight towards the fire burning in the center of the room. The little girl was now levitating a few inches off the ground, her eyes still white and rolled back, but now she had a mad grin spreading wide across her face. She began to laugh as Teddy strode into the fire. It took him a few seconds to realize what was happening, like someone who has set their hand on a stove burner, only to realize it is turned on. But then in an instant he was lit up like a torch. Teddy turned into a blazing inferno as the little girl's laugh turned into a screeching cackle. I felt something cold rush to me a second later, and then saw two women in white and black habits, like those worn by nuns. They were putting out the fire and praying, holding a Bible up into the air and pulling the little girl back down. She settled gently to the floor as the fire went out, and I realized Teddy had also been extinguished, as if the fire existed in some other time, and I was the only one who could see it, and them. Running out of that room, I raced down the stairs to find a security guard at the door, pulling the brick doorstop out of its place. "Who keeps opening this door?" he was saying to himself. I yelled at him to stop and told him to get help. My friend was in trouble. "Not again," the security guard muttered, probably thinking I couldn't hear him. They really need to tear this old place down before it kills anyone else. Luckily, Teddy survived the event, but he's been in a coma for quite a while and was unable to defend me during the court proceedings. I was forced to tell the judge what had happened by myself, and he wasn't inclined to believe me. Pyromaniac ghosts aren't exactly the best legal defense, as my exasperated lawyer will tell you. But I wasn't going to lie, and I wasn't going to admit to something I didn't do. I didn't hurt my friend. I didn't leave him there to die. I just hope Teddy wakes up one day soon. I know he'll tell them I'm innocent. Someone smuggled in a cell phone for me so that I could share my story. A true friend. I just hope Teddy can clear my name or I'm gonna be in this asylum for a long, long time.